In this video, we're breaking down every draft class from the NFC North and giving every team a letter grade. And we're going to start with the Chicago Bears, who obviously had a great pick. They get their franchise quarterback, Caleb Williams. Williams and Drake May are my two highest graded quarterback prospects since I created this grading scale 3 years ago. He's the best out of structure quarterback that I've ever evaluated. There might be a slight adjustment period, getting used to working more from within the pocket and figuring out exactly what he's capable of as far as outside of the pocket escapability, but he's shown on tape the ability to hang in the pocket and throw with anticipation. So they're getting one of the best quarterback prospects in recent memory, and he's going to about as favorable of a situation as you could expect for the first overall pick. And they make that situation even more favorable by taking Rome Odunze with the 9th pick. I think these first two picks was pretty much the dream scenario for the Bears. Receiver wasn't necessarily the biggest need with the addition of Keenan Allen, but Rome Odunze is a blue chip prospect, best hands and best contested catch skills of any receiver in this class. I did have him as wide receiver 3 behind Harrison Jr. and Neighbors. I don't think he has the overwhelming explosiveness and athleticism of Neighbors and the route running polish of Marvin Harrison Jr., but he's an effective route runner. He's still a good athlete by NFL standards, absolutely. And I'm excited to see him running a more diverse route tree. The fades and go routes were kind of the staple of Washington's offense, but I definitely think he's capable of more. In the 3rd round, they took Karan Amegaji, tackle out of Yale. I really like this pick as a developmental tackle or guard. He's a difficult player to evaluate because the level of competition is just so far from what he's going to face in the NFL. Even compared to the other FCS offensive linemen, like the South Dakota State offensive linemen weren't playing great competition, but it was at least good for the FCS level. Amegaji was going up against, Dartmouth, Cornell, no one that could even come close to threatening him, but he showed the dominance in the run game that you want to see for a player at his competition level. And in pass pro, I thought he was pretty good with his hands. He's obviously got traits that you just can't teach, and it kind of felt like he was just going for the kill shot every play, which I don't necessarily blame him for. But get him a year of development, I think he's got a good chance to be a quality starter, and the upside with him is through the roof. The one pick I didn't care for was Tory Taylor in the 4th round. He's a really good punter, but I just disagree with taking special teamers in the top 4 or 5 rounds. I think you can still find starters at other positions there potentially, but they finished their draft on a high note, taking Austin Booker, edge rusher out of Kansas. This is a player that I think really should have gone back to school and would have had a chance of improving their draft stock with another year of good tape, but it ends up working out for the Bears because they get him in the 5th round. He only has 505 career snaps, but for such an inexperienced player, he is so skilled with his hands. He's got long arms and just a knack for separating himself from blocks. I thought he was a pretty good athlete on tape. He didn't test very well, which ended up lowering his draft stock in my opinion. And at the combine, he was 240 pounds, so definitely someone that needs to fill out his frame to be in there on early downs. But at his pro day, he actually weighed in at 253 and ran a 4.77. I don't know what kind of weight that is, but it's good to see him at least maintain his average testing numbers with 15 additional pounds. And the only UDFA that I had written up for the Bears is defensive lineman Keith Randolph Jr. out of Illinois. I'll put my scouting report for him up on the screen. So I'm giving the Bears draft an A-. Definitely one of the best classes this year. I liked every pick except for Tory Taylor with just 5 picks. I don't know if I would have spent one of those on a punter, but everyone else they took was in my top 100, so big fan of this class. Next up, we've got the Detroit Lions, who ended up addressing their cornerback need with, I think, back-to-back great value picks. They trade up to get Terry and Arnold at 24, one of the best change of direction corners in this class. His ability to flip his hips and make smooth, efficient transitions, I think, is his most impressive trait. He has really good ball skills. He was targeted a lot this year, had 12 pass breakups, 5 interceptions, and then I think he's also one of the best run defending corners in this class. You could make the argument that the Lions got the 2 best run defending corners this year. I do have some concerns about his speed, not just based on the 40-yard dash. There are times on tape that he'll get beat down the field and can't recover, so I kind of have a feeling that his best position might be at nickel, but he's definitely a player that I would try on the outside to start out. And then at 61, they get Ennis Rakestraw Jr. out of Missouri. A lot of similarities between him and Terry and Arnold. He doesn't have ideal speed for an outside corner, and he is a little bit undersized, but I really like everything else about his game. He's so composed and under control in press coverage. Even though he only has 1 career interception, I didn't think that playing the ball was an issue for him. He rarely gets targeted because he's just plastering every receiver he goes up against, so he didn't have that many interception opportunities. And when he was targeted, I didn't didn't think there were a lot of like easy interceptions that he left on the field. And then he's another player that's just a tenacious run defender, shedding blocks, making plays in the backfield. I think these first 2 picks really fit the identity of the Detroit Lions, and I love the strategy of doubling up at a position of need. The one thing I will say that's a slight concern for me is they're kind of stacking up a lot of slower cornerbacks. I'm good with making 1 or 2 exceptions, but between Terrion Arnold, Ennis Rakestraw, Carlton Davis, you could even lump Brian Branch into the cornerback group because he plays slot. Those are 4 players where I would say speed is their biggest weakness, and I think certain teams and certain matchups could give them some trouble, but still I'm absolutely in favor of just adding good players. I wasn't as big of a fan of what they did in the 4th round. Giovanni Manu out of British Columbia, I just watched his tape before recording this video. He played in the U Sports League in Canada. He's over 6'7", 352 pounds, and he had a 33.5-inch vertical, ran a 5.06 in the 40-yard dash. This is a rare athlete in terms of size, speed, and explosiveness, and his run blocking tape specifically is just unfair. He drives people off the line of scrimmage. If I was a U Sports linebacker, I would be terrified of this dude climbing to the 2nd level. I actually feel like he could be a quality run blocker as a rookie. I do think he's a lot more developmental in pass pro, so I probably wouldn't have taken him in the 4th round. I'm not sure about his pocket range and lateral quickness. When he has to get depth to block a speed rush, you can tell he's really leaning his weight too far upfield, and that opens up a lot of opportunities for inside counters. There are some flashes of really good hand usage, but he's got to develop the consistency with strike timing and hand placement. I ended up with a 6th round grade on him. I think the 4th round is probably too early, but I definitely see the upside. And then their second 4th round pick was Sione Vaki out of Utah. I had a 7th round grade on him as a safety. I was not really impressed with his safety tape. He's a good straight line athlete, hard hitter. As a run and hit box safety, I think he can do some nice things, but as far as change of direction fluidity and zone instincts and deep coverage, I was pretty underwhelmed. But they announced him as a running back, and if that's where they're going to play him, I actually don't really mind the pick. He only had 42 carries this past season, but he was extremely efficient, showed the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. He can track it over his shoulder on deep routes. If he had a full season of running back tape that looked like it did in 2023, then I would probably have ended up with a lot higher grade on him. So I don't love the pick, but I don't dislike it as much as the grade discrepancy would indicate. And then they finished their draft with what I think are 2 steals in the 6th round. I thought Mekhi Wingo was the best LSU defensive tackle. He ended up being the 3rd one off the board. He has elite first step explosiveness. He's actually pretty good with his hands. You'll see him use a cross chop, club rip, and then he can also win with speed to power. He had some really nice bull rush reps lined up outside over the tackle. And then he is extremely undersized, but I actually thought he held up pretty well in the run game. His stack and shed technique is really consistent. He does a good job of keeping his play side hand free against reach blocks. He'll have some limitations on early downs, probably at 284 pounds with shorter arms, but I think his skill and technique allows him to punch above his weight class. And then Christian Mahogany, the guard out of Boston College, it seems like he fell based on some injury concerns, but based on the tape, I think he should have been a 4th round pick. He has size and athleticism. He's a nasty block finisher in the run game. If he can stay healthy, I think he's got a chance to be a starter within a couple years. And they got a couple UDFAs that I had written up. Isaiah Williams, the receiver out of Illinois, I think is an interesting slot receiver. And Ohio State linebacker Steele Chambers, I wasn't a huge fan of. So I'm going to give this class a B+. I really like the first 2 picks. Kind of wish one of them was a faster cornerback, but still hard to complain about Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw. The 4th round is where I have the most questions, although I do at least see the vision with both of those picks. And then Mekhi Wingo and Christian Mahogany to finish the draft are just absolute steals, assuming both of them can stay healthy. Moving on to the Green Bay Packers, they had a ton of draft capital, and I think for the most part, especially early in the draft, they did a good job of addressing their needs at appropriate value. They took Jordan Morgan, the left tackle out of Arizona. I had him as a guard on my board, but he falls within that tier of players that I think is probably best at guard, but I definitely try them at tackle. I think Jordan Morgan's tape against UCLA was some of the best offensive line tape in this class. He definitely had the best performance against Leatu Latu of any offensive tackle this year, and you saw his advanced hand usage in that matchup. Leatu Latu was used to just spamming the cross chop, and whatever tackle he was going up against just crumbled into dust, but Morgan knew how to bait out that move, protect his outside hand, be patient with his strike. If I just watched that game, I think Jordan Morgan would be like a top 15 player for me. I just thought the rest of his tape was nowhere near as consistent. He had a rough matchup against Washington. Braylon Trice was able to beat him with power a couple times. The Utah game, the Washington State game, I thought were both pretty rough. With his movement skills and some of the flashes that he's shown with hand usage, I think he has a chance to stick at tackle and could end up being a quality player. I do worry about his length and not having that margin for error if he gets beat around the outside, and I think he's got to improve his anchor footwork and get more consistent squaring up to bull rushes. I really like their next two picks. Edgerrin Cooper was my top ranked linebacker. He's got athletic traits that you just can't teach. 34-inch arms. I think he's the fastest and most explosive linebacker in this class. He can plant his foot, accelerate, and close in the blink of an eye, and you definitely want him to add some weight so he can hold up in the run game if blockers are able to get hands on him. But with his length, he's actually able to stack and shed blocks pretty effectively. The main area that he'll probably need some development is in coverage, but it's not like he was a bad cover linebacker. He just had a very elementary coverage role in Texas A&M's defense. He was basically just hovering 5 yards past the line of scrimmage every play, either as a QB spy or in a simple hook zone drop, and he's a weapon as a QB spy. He was able to rack up 10 sacks in 2023, and he's so good at defending screens. He's got the quick play recognition and closing burst, but playing man coverage, taking deep zone drops, sorting through route concepts, that's a bit more of an unknown with Edgerrin Cooper. He's got the traits to be a good cover linebacker. That's just kind of one of the downsides of some of these college defenses. I also like the Javon Bullard pick at 58. He's kind of a slot safety hybrid, outstanding play recognition and timing breaking on the football. His anticipation as a deep safety was really impressive. He's able to read the route but keep vision on the quarterback, and a lot of times break before he even winds up to throw the ball. He is kind of undersized for a box safety, but he did a good job of evading blocks, and he's a really physical run defender. And then he was also really sticky in man coverage. I still like him as more of a safety that can play some man. I don't know that he's a slot corner that I want manning up receivers, but Javon Bullard is just an extremely talented defensive back. Really like this pick. They took Marshawn Lloyd at 88. I think this is a solid pick as well. He's got the size and athletic traits that you look for, ran a 4.46 at 220 pounds. He has the most violent and explosive jump cuts of any running back in this class. He covers so much ground out of his jump cut, and he's also able to string together multiple jump cuts. There's no reload time in between each move. So you combine that with his creativity as a runner, his ability to reverse his path and make something out of nothing. I think he could be a big play machine in the NFL. The creative running style can get him into trouble sometimes, where he'll cut back into traffic or try to find a 40-yard gain instead of just taking the layup. And then he has 8 career fumbles. Definitely needs to clean up the ball security, although I will say a few of those were like read option, mesh point, miscommunication type of things. They could have been his fault, but I always have a difficult time really evaluating those. And then to be trusted on third down, I think he's also got to clean up his pass pro. But I think Marshawn Lloyd has a ton of upside. Into the third round, I think is good value for him. Their last third round pick was Missouri linebacker Tyron Hopper. I was not a big fan of this pick. I had a 6th round grade on him. He has average size and athletic traits, and he was a very inconsistent tackler. Despite having shorter arms, I thought he was very proactive, engaging with blocks, and actually did a pretty good job keeping his frame clean. And I definitely think he has the instincts and experience to be a good cover linebacker, but again, the athletic traits kind of limit him there. He's basically the opposite of Edgerrin Cooper as a cover linebacker, where he played a very advanced coverage role in Missouri's defense. He was taking deep zone drops. He's playing man coverage on seam routes from the tight end, angle routes from the backfield, but he doesn't really have the speed to keep up with tight ends down the seam. He was having to grab at their jersey. Sometimes he would just get beat. Sometimes he'd get a penalty called on him. I don't know. I just don't see Tyron Hopper as worth a 3rd round pick, so probably my least favorite pick in this class. They took Oregon safety Evan Williams in the 4th round. He's a really interesting player. He isn't the fastest safety, but he's really explosive and fluid, changing directions. He's got a smooth back pedal. He's really efficient out of his transitions. I think his zone coverage processing skills for the most part are pretty good. He's a physical run defender. defender. He's an effective blitzer. 25% of his pass rushes last year ended up in a sack, but he doesn't have great ball skills and he's undersized with below average speed. I ended up with a 6th round grade on him, but I do think he can be kind of a Swiss Army knife versatile player that can play a lot of different roles as a third safety. They took Jacob Monk in the 5th round, offensive lineman out of Duke. I didn't watch him. And then another safety in the 5th round, Keaton Oladapo. I really liked his tape. Again, the speed is what limited my grade for him, but I think he does so many other things at a high level. He has the ideal size and frame for a box safety. He's a fully committed run defender, not afraid of contact. The open field tackling does need to improve, but outside of that, I like pretty much everything that he gives you in run support. And then he's very smart in coverage in terms of diagnosing route concepts. There were very few coverage busts on his tape. He's pretty fluid in man coverage, and then he has exceptional ball skills. The one thing is he will get outrun by deep threats down the field, but I like the strategy by Green Bay to identify the need at safety and then just take 3 shots at kind of different skill sets that can play some different roles for them. They took Georgia State tackle Travis Glover in the 6th round. I really liked this pick. He has a really thick build with long arms, 317 pounds, arm length was just under 35 inches, and he plays with an edge in both phases. He's looking to finish every single block into the ground. But what kind of ties him together as a prospect is that he's got the size, but he's also extremely skilled with his hands. He does a great job of using light jabs to kind of feel out the rush and keep his hands in striking position without overextending. The main limitation and the reason he fell to the 6th round is that he doesn't have great pocket range. He has good awareness of inside counters. He's very proactive of keeping his post hand ready to strike, but he is kind of lacking the slide quickness to mirror those inside through the B gap. But I do think with the Packers' history of these mid to late round tackles, I think Travis Glover could end up being a steal. They get Michael Pratt in the 7th round. I don't know how Sean Clifford goes 2 rounds earlier than him, but he's kind of a high floor, low ceiling backup quarterback. He's accurate. He's one of the better processors in this class. He can make full field reads. He does an outstanding job of manipulating zone coverage with his eyes or with pump fakes. He's really good at creating or maximizing windows in zone coverage, but he doesn't have a very strong arm, especially when he's trying to push like a deep out. The ball just dies on him and defenders can undercut it. And I know he was dealing with an injury last season after the first game, but I thought his 2023 tape took a step back from the previous year. There were some bad decisions in the quick game where he would just not recognize underneath players or spy defenders. He's a decent straight line athlete, but he doesn't really have the short area movement skills to avoid sacks consistently. And then he also has a really drawn out windup where he's slow to release the football, but he's also reaching back, and that opened up a lot of opportunities for strip sacks. But I still think he should have gone earlier than the 7th round, so definitely like this pick. And then Kalen King at the end of day 3, it's like, why not take a gamble that 2022 was the real Kalen King. Based on his 2022 tape, he probably would have been a top 50 pick, but pretty much everything he's done since then has lowered his draft stock. His tape last year was extremely disappointing. He was one of the worst corners at the Senior Bowl, and he didn't test very well. But if he can unlock whatever zone he was in the year before and get back to 2022 form, this could end up being a steal. And the one UDFA that I had written up was Trente Jones, guard out of Michigan. I actually liked him as kind of a mid-day 3 pick. I think he's got some interesting athletic traits. I'll put his scouting report up on the screen. So I'm going to give the Packers class a C. I thought it was a little bit too early for Jordan Morgan. Edrin Cooper, Javon Bullard, Marshawn Lloyd, I think were solid picks. Tyron Hopper to me was a major reach, but then they get some good value on day 3 with Travis Glover and Keaton Oladapo. And finally, we've got the Minnesota Vikings who take JJ McCarthy at 10. I had a late first round grade on JJ McCarthy, so I probably wouldn't have taken him this early, but as long as you're not trading up to like the top 5 to take him, I don't have a major problem with that. I think he has an above average arm by NFL standards. He's a pretty good athlete. He's got to figure out how to throw with touch. There are just too many line drives over the middle of the field, and he really struggles with ball placement and depth when he has to elevate a pass down the sideline. I think his processing skills obviously need some development like every quarterback, but he did some pretty translatable stuff in Michigan's offense. Despite the low pass passing volume. He actually had a relatively high volume of NFL concepts, throwing over the middle of the field. He's able to avoid pressure, reset his base, get rid of the ball as he's getting hit. When he breaks out of the pocket, he's got some nice playmaking instincts, very accurate throwing on the run. So there's definitely some promise with JJ McCarthy. Don't think he's reached his final form yet. For me, I don't see the upside that I think a lot of people see, but he went to a really good situation and I think will most likely be at least a solid starter. Now, the Dallas Turner pick, I really like just in terms of getting my 13th ranked player at 17th overall at a position of need. But to give up this much draft capital to move up, I really disagree with, or at least question the decision making there. I'm sure Kwesi has a lot of information that I'm not privy to, but being that aggressive does not make sense to me. As a player, Dallas Turner has the most upside of any edge rusher in this class. He's got long arms, elite explosiveness, and straight line speed. The main way that he wins, though, is actually not as a speed rusher. He has a borderline dominant long arm and speed to power. His length and first step explosiveness allows him to establish early contact and drive blockers back into the pocket, and then his inside counter is just impossible to mirror. He is so sudden, attacking the B gap once he gets the tackle to overset. To really become a complete pass rusher, he's got to get a lot better with his hands, find some go-to pass rushing move, a go-to method of defeating the outside hand. He'll kind of use a chop or a swipe, but it's never really that effective or coordinated. If he just becomes a technician, you're looking at someone with all pro potential. I just disagree with the trade up and giving up all that future draft capital. They took Oregon cornerback Kyrie Jackson in the 4th round. He is a long press corner. His length gives him such an advantage at the line of scrimmage or at the catch point. He can smother releases. He can shield receivers from the ball. I like the fit in Minnesota's defense with how aggressive they are blitzing. If the quarterback only has 2 seconds to get rid of the ball, Kyrie Jackson can make the receiver take a 1.5 seconds to get off the line of scrimmage. And then if you target him, his length gives him that margin of error to disrupt at the catch point. He's just really stiff moving laterally. He's another one of these players that didn't run a 3-cone or short shuttle for a reason. If he misses with his hands and the receiver's able to get a clean release, he's just not a fluid mirror man coverage type of corner. Walter Roos in the 6th round, I think, is a really solid tackle prospect. He allowed the lowest pressure rate of any FBS tackle last year, 1.32%. He has great size, really long arms. He's a bulldozing run blocker, does a great job staying connected to blocks and driving his legs, but he rarely misses assignments in the run game. I think his pocket range is a bit limited. He can lose the corner to more explosive speed rushers, and he needs to be more consistent getting his hands inside and having a forceful initial strike. He also has a very predictable punch in pass pro where he's always striking with the outside hand, and for players with more average recovery skills, if that outside hand gets chopped down, he can get beat around the edge. They took a kicker in the 6th round who I have no opinion on, and then Michael Juergens, the Wake Forest guard, they took in the 7th round. I'm not sure if he's going to play guard or center in the NFL. I think he could play both. He had some really good run blocking tape, but just undersized, doesn't have a very strong anchor. And their final pick was Levi Drake Rodriguez, defensive lineman out of Texas A&M Commerce. I did not watch him, so I don't have an opinion on him. And I'll show the scouting reports I have written for their UDFAs. Gabriel Murphy was actually my highest graded undrafted free agent. I really like Dwight McGlothern out of Arkansas as an off corner with really good instincts and ball skills. And then South Carolina tight end Trey Knox is a converted receiver, excellent route runner, but kind of a limited athlete and doesn't give you much after the catch. So overall, I'm giving the Vikings class a C. I think just based on the picks and where they took them, it would be closer to a C+ or B-, but factoring in the trade ups, that does bring my grade down to a C.